I don't often use my bottle opener. Well, I don't use it for bottle opening, I use it for a lot of stuff. But we have here Mexican Coca-Cola, which requires a bottle opener. You know, it's kind of funny. Coke has had a long and strange history. But although we've been, into the high fructose corn syrup here, in Mexico, she's sugar. That high fructose corn syrup is killing you people. But it is amazing. This is like Coke used to be before they got on that corn syrup kick. This is actually being sold at like $1.19 a bottle. And it's, bottle, glass bottle. It's unfortunate that these aren't returnable. I'd like to see them get back to that. But, $1.19, that's still cheaper. A lot of times pop is like, say, $1.50. The one thing about these, though, these are the heavy glass Coke bottles. When I was a kid, we had a glass cutter that you could take bottles and cut them to make glass, and we used to do that, cut them right below the label. You could make these really heavy tumblers out of them. And I think I got that thing laying around here someplace, so I'll have to try that. But if you should ever run across this, you compare this to the new Coke, there's no comparison. Well, I don't even mean the new Coke, because that was a whole disaster, but what Coke is now is not what Coke used to be. This is what Coke used to be. Done right, in a bottle, with sugar. Now this is probably cane sugar, I would say, coming out of Mexico. Around here, I used to work at the sugar beet plant, making your regular beet sugar. And that's a pretty labor-intensive operation. But I loaded hundreds of carloads of sugar that went to Coca-Cola. They were one of the biggest customers we had. But now it's, all that corn syrup, which, like I say, is killing you. But, I the thing that always bugs me, there's a whole bunch of kids that have grown up drinking Mountain Dew, and it's slowly just killing them. But there's a whole bunch of people who are really addicted to Mountain Dew. But it's the corn syrup and the caffeine. But, I don't drink a lot of pop, but if I do, old Coca-Cola is the way to go. You just can't believe the difference. But better cap where the flies will be in her. Okay, I'm working. I always wanted to make an immigrant truck, and that is what I'm working on now. That's what all this cutting and planing, a lot of that was for this. Now I'm making up the panels, which involves tongue and groove. So I've been hand fitting those. This part will be the lid. Now, if you understand these immigrant trunks, or if you don't, you should probably just look them up and look at some of the pictures of how they were built. They're really works of art. It got to be a regular cottage industry in the Scandinavian countries, building trunks for immigrants. And there's no two the same, but there's a kind of a general pattern there that you get an eye on. Like a lot of them have got a roll kind of top to them. Theory being that they wouldn't be buried in the hold of a ship then. They were more likely to be on the top. if they were awkward to pack. Because they're important to you, because it was everything that you had, everything that was dear to you was coming in that trunk. So they were pretty fancy, a lot of them. They varied. I mean, they could be plain wooden boxes, crudely made, to, like I say, works of art. But this panel here, I'll be gluing this up when I get the joints fitting to my liking. And then I will warp this. And that's easier to do than it sounds. So I'll get a gradual curve, not a sharp, like you think, but more the gradual curve. But if you look at pictures of the immigrant trunks, you'll get an idea what I'm after. And this is the basswood that I'm using. And when I cut these, depending on where you cut the wood in the tree, will depend on how the wood will tend to want to warp. Now, I don't know if it's obvious to you, but it's got a slight warpage here. That's from, now the sun, when it came up, then it starts drying this part out, but this part is still wet underneath, damp from the dew. So it's going to want to curve this way. Now, if I flipped it over, it would want to curve the other way. But I'll be able to curve it by putting water on one side and drying the other side, and it'll come around. But first I got to make it one piece, much like this is one piece, which will be the bottom of the trunk. But even if I'm sitting overnight, you can see, maybe, there's a slight curvature like this. So now I'm sitting it in the sun and it'll bring it back again. But you can kind of flex wood around that way. But the sides will be, it's going to be like 2 by 3 approximately. Like I say, this will be the top, but the boards for the sides will be similar. So the side will be about that high, then another piece, and then the lid. And I don't know how much of that I'll show as I go along, because it's a lot of intricate fitting, to get everything right. Yeah, I put them back. I should mark these so I make sure and get them right so they fit. But and when I'm done with it, like I said, I'll show little pieces along the way, because I've got a, the odd thing about these too, they were usually, like say, this is the side of the trunk, this is the bottom. They were built at a slant like this. That kind of protects the corners. But the slant also works on this side. So I'll be working dovetails at an angle on all 4 corners. So that's going to be a lot of hand cutting. And then the bottom will actually be mortised in. So I'll have to assemble it in a particular order. But she'll go together. I've wanted to do one of these for a long time. Just finally getting around to it. Everything kind of comes together gradually. Like I say, I'm never in a hurry on this stuff. I work at it at my speed. And when she's done, it will be the pine tar with the ochre in it. And that, I just put that on this morning, and that seems to be really soaking in there good. And if you look at those pictures, you'll see a lot of them were, most of them were painted red or green, red and black a lot of times, green and black. And almost always with the name and address of who they were and where they were going, to a place they'd never been before. But it was to make sure the trunk got there, because they had to go from the ship to the train, and hopefully, most of these people knew where they were going, because they were going to a place where there were other relatives or people from the same area had already moved there. But it was really in this Minnesota, North Dakota, and Wisconsin, where the major portion of the Scandinavian immigrants went. So you'll see these in almost every museum, this kind of a trunk. And I've looked at many of them, which is why I'm kind of working my own ideas on this. But I'll show you again later as I go along. Like I say, I don't hurry on this stuff. Time on this sort of thing doesn't really matter. It's not material. I'm not working on a deadline. It's kind of the journey. But I know this tree, and it will be a trunk.